For 11 years, Meredith Cairns had trusted the wrong person with the most important job she had ever handed to anyone. Every month she sent an e-transfer to Denise Cairns from her apartment in Vancouver. $600 in the early years when her architecture firm was still finding its footing, climbing to $1,200 as the contracts grew. Each transfer carried the same note. For mom and dad, groceries, meds, whatever they need. Each month Denise replied with the same words, "Got it, they're doing great." Meredith had believed her because Denise was the eldest. Because Denise had been the practical one, the one who stayed in Kenmore while Meredith chased blueprints and city contracts. Because when Meredith had packed her car 11 years ago, Denise had stood on the porch and said, "Go. Build something. We'll take care of them here." So Meredith had gone. She had drafting tables and takeout containers and 6-day work weeks. She had pitched projects she wasn't ready for and won them anyway. She had built Cairns Design from a 2-person studio above a dry cleaner into a firm with 12 employees and a reputation for getting difficult things right. At 38, she was the kind of architect clients called when something important needed to last. None of that felt like much when she turned off the county road and onto the gravel lane that led to her parents' house. She had not told them she was coming. She wanted it to be a surprise. In the passenger seat beside her was a manila envelope containing the paperwork and keys for a 2-bedroom unit near Kitts Beach in Vancouver. Ground floor because her father's knees weren't what they used to be. A small south-facing patio where her mother could grow herbs in containers year-round. She had signed everything herself, walked through 11 buildings before choosing this one. Turned down anything too dark or too loud. She had stood in that empty living room and imagined her father, Alastair Cairns, settling into a chair by the window. She had imagined her mother, Frances Cairns, finding the light and saying, "This will do just fine," in that particular tone of hers that meant she was happier than she let on. For weeks, Meredith had carried the moment of their faces in her mind. Then she saw the eavesdrows. She slowed without meaning to. The eavesdrows had pulled away from the fascia on the left side, dropping at an angle, dangling above the flower beds her mother had maintained for 30 years. The beds themselves were bare, not winter bare. The soil was pale and cracked in a way that came from months without water. A rusted garden fork leaned against the porch railing, stiff with disuse. Maybe they had simply let things go. Her father was 73, her mother was 71. It was reasonable to slow down. That was what Meredith told herself as she gathered the envelope and stepped into the October air. The porch boards shifted under her feet. One had softened in the middle, the kind of give that meant rot beneath the surface. She made note of it the way she made note of structural things. Then she knocked. No answer. She knocked again. A long pause and then the sound of something being moved, a chair maybe, and slow deliberate footsteps. The door opened. Alastair Cairns had been a broad man, with hands built for cabinet making, wide palms, strong thumbs, knuckles formed by years of useful work. The kind of man who fixed things without being asked and built things without expecting to be thanked, because doing both was simply what you did. The man in the doorway was smaller. His flannel shirt was too large in the shoulders. His face had changed in the way faces change when weight goes slowly and no one says anything about it. His eyes were still the same clear gray she had always known, but they held something she had never seen there before, relief, not surprise, not joy. Relief, as if he had been waiting for someone to arrive before it became too late. "Mary," he said, his voice came out rough and low. She stepped forward and held him before she had decided to. She felt the change immediately, not the solid hold she remembered but something more careful, like a man conserving what he had. He patted her back twice, firm and brief, the way he had always shown love without making a fuss. "Come inside," he said, "your mother's in the kitchen." She followed him through the hallway. The house smelled like it always had, wood polish and something faintly herbal. But underneath those familiar things was something else. Cold air that had settled too long. The particular smell of a furnace not working hard enough. The living room had not been touched. The same sofa, the same braided rug, but the lampshade had a yellowed bruise on one side, and above the fireplace the mantel held 3 framed photographs and one notable absence. The wooden clock her father had made himself, cedar with brass numerals, which had hung above every family gathering she could remember, was gone. A pale rectangle on the wall remained where it had been, stark as a missing tooth. Meredith stood looking at it for a moment, before she followed her father into the kitchen. Frances Cairns turned from the counter the instant Meredith appeared in the doorway. She moved too quickly, her arm sweeping something toward the back of the counter before she turned with a smile. "My girl," she said. Meredith crossed the room and held her. Her mother was lighter than memory, and she smelled like hand cream and Earl Grey, and for 1 second Meredith closed her eyes and let herself be 23 again, leaving for the first time her mother's hands pressing into her shoulders. Then she felt how tightly her mother was holding on. Not warmth, not quite welcome. Something more like the grip of a person who has been waiting and is not entirely sure they deserve to let go. Meredith sat at the kitchen table and watched her mother move. The movements were practiced and steady, but she noticed the hesitation when Frances opened the cabinet. The way she checked the inside before pulling out 2 mugs, both different patterns, neither matching the set Meredith remembered. One had a hairline crack along the handle sealed with a thin line of dried glue. Her father lowered himself into the chair at the head of the table, one hand braced on the surface. He wore his reading glasses, the ones she had sent 2 Christmases ago, in a hard case, but the left arm was held together with a small tight coil of electrical tape. Meredith looked at the tape. She said nothing yet. Her mother set the mugs on the table and opened the cabinet again. The door swung fully open. Meredith saw the shelves in one glance. 4 cans, a half-empty box of crackers, a small bag of rolled oats sealed with a rubber band. Not a pantry, not a week's worth of groceries. What was left? Her chest went tight. They talked about small things. The drive, the weather. Her father asked about a project she had mentioned months ago, and Meredith answered carefully, watching her mother set the mugs down, watching her hands steady themselves on the table edge before sitting. Then Meredith placed the envelope between them. She explained it simply. The condo near the water, the patio for growing things, the elevator for his knees. She had thought of everything. She said she wanted them close. She said she was done with the distance. Frances pressed her lips together, her eyes filled. Alistair looked at the envelope for a long time. Then he looked at his daughter with something too large to name. Gratitude that had nowhere to go. "We can't let you do that," Frances said. "It's already done," Meredith said. Her mother turned her face toward the window. The silence that followed was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of a woman calculating how much truth the moment could hold. "Mom," Meredith said, "tell me what's happening." Frances put both hands flat on the table. She looked at Alistair. He gave the smallest nod. "We didn't want to bother you," she said. Those 5 words hit Meredith like cold water. She asked about the bills. Frances hesitated. She asked about the furnace. Her father said they had kept it lower to save costs. She asked about groceries. Her mother said they weren't big eaters anymore. Then Meredith opened her banking app and turned the screen around. 11 years of transfers, every month, every note. For Mom and Dad, meds and groceries, Dad's physio, make sure the furnace gets serviced. She could add the total in her head. Nearly $90,000 sent to Denise Cairns with instructions that had apparently never reached this table. Her father squinted at the screen. He reached for his taped glasses and leaned in. "I sent this to Denise," Meredith said, "every month." She said she passed it along. Her mother's face did not show shock. It showed something worse. The slow, settled look of a person whose suspicion had finally been confirmed. "She brought cash sometimes," Frances said, a little. "She said you were having a hard stretch. She said we shouldn't ask for more." Meredith set the phone on the table. "She told you I was having a hard stretch?" Her mother nodded once, small, ashamed, though she had done nothing wrong. Alistair's jaw moved. He looked away from the phone toward the window, toward the backyard where his workshop had stood for 40 years. "She told you that often?" Meredith asked. "Often enough," he said. Meredith looked again at the blank rectangle above the fireplace. "Dad, where's the cedar clock?" Her parents exchanged a glance. Quick, practiced, the look of 2 people who had been protecting each other inside a hard truth for a long time. "Denise said the house needed to be cleared out a bit," her mother said. "She said it would be easier." "Easier for what?" No answer. Meredith walked back into the living room and looked properly at what was missing. The clock. The set of framed botanical prints her mother had collected over 40 years. The hand-carved loom bookends her father had made. The winter Meredith was 12, all of them gone. Only faded outlines remained on the walls. She came back to the kitchen. "Where are the bookends?" Her father's mouth tightened. "Where are Mom's prints?" Frances looked down at her mug. She said she was storing them for safekeeping. Meredith heard the phrase and knew immediately what it meant. It did not mean storage. Then her father said quietly, "There's something else." Her mother put her hand over his, not to stop him, to steady him for what was coming. "The cabin," he said. Meredith went very still. The cabin at Mercer Lake had been in the Cairns family for 27 years. Her father had bought the lot the year after her parents married, when the land cost almost nothing, and spent 3 summers building the cabin himself, board by board, driving out on weekends with lumber strapped to the truck. 2 rooms, a dock, a wood stove that ticked and popped in the cold. It sat on the water, and the land had grown in value every year until it was worth more than the house they were sitting in. Her father had never spoken of selling. It was not an investment. It was proof. Proof that a man who worked with his hands his whole life could leave something solid behind. What about the cabin? Meredith asked. Denise came with papers, her mother said. About 8 months ago. She said there could be complications if anything happened to us. Legal things, estate things. She said putting it under her name would protect everyone and keep it in the family. Meredith did not speak. She said it was temporary, her father said. His voice had gone flat. She said she'd make sure it came back to all three of you. She brought a man with her, said he was a lawyer. Did you read it? Her father looked at the table. The print was small, her mother said, and Denise explained everything. She seemed so certain. She told you she was protecting you. Yes. While she was taking the only thing you had left. Her mother covered her mouth. Her father didn't move. Meredith pulled out her phone and opened the county land registry. She found the Mercer Lake parcel in under 2 minutes. The registered owner had been updated 9 months ago. Denise L. Cairns. She showed her father. He looked at it the way a man looks at something that confirms a fear he was too loyal to admit. I asked her once, he said. I said, Denise, that cabin belongs to all of us. You know that. He paused. She said, Dad, do you really think I would do anything to hurt this family? He had probably apologized for asking. Meredith could picture it clearly. Her father, proud and honest and entirely unequipped for that kind of manipulation, saying no, of course not, I just wanted to be sure. And Denise folding the paper and knowing she had won. That night Meredith waited until her parents were asleep. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and built the picture slowly. Transfer by transfer, month by month. She photographed the empty pantry shelves. She photographed the taped glasses on the counter. She photographed the pale rectangles on the living room wall, where her mother's things used to hang. Then she called her younger brother. Cole Cairns answered on the third ring. He sounded like a man who had been expecting the call for longer than he wanted to admit. I know why you're calling, he said. Then talk, she said. He came to the house the next morning, grease in the creases of his palms the way it always was after years in the shop. He sat across from Meredith and turned his coffee mug in a slow circle, and didn't look at her for the first minute. I knew something was wrong, he said. Not everything, not the land, but enough. She waited, sighed. 5 years ago I had a problem. He said it plainly, like a man who had practiced the sentence until it stopped feeling like an excuse. Sports betting. I got in too deep. I took money from Dad's emergency account, one he kept for medical things. I told myself it was temporary. How much? 38,000. He said the number without flinching. Gone in 4 months. Their father had a heart condition. That account existed specifically for what could happen without warning. Denise found out when she went through the statements after his last hospital visit, Cole continued. She came to me with copies. Said if I didn't do what she told me she'd tell Dad. She said his heart couldn't take it. So I signed what she forwarded me. I told myself it was just reorganizing things. That she wasn't really. He stopped. I was a coward. Meredith let the silence sit between them. When did you understand what she'd actually done? When the registry updated. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. I kept everything. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But I couldn't throw it out. Inside the envelope were printed screenshots. Text messages from Denise. Sign what I forward you. You know what I can do if you don't. A copy of the land transfer agreement with Cole's name on a witness line. A final message sent after the transfer processed. It's done, you're clear. Don't contact me about this again. Meredith read them twice. She didn't pay you, she said. Not a question. She said there were costs, fees. She said I should be grateful Dad never found out. A short, humorless sound. She used his heart to keep me quiet and then used everything else to take what was his. Meredith looked at the signature line for Alistair Cairns on the property document. She had seen her father's handwriting her whole life, on birthday cards, on notes left on the counter, on the tags of gifts wrapped in brown paper. His signature leaned right with a long looping A and a characteristic hesitation before the final S. The signature on this document was too upright, too clean, too confident. Cole, she kept her voice even. Did Dad sign this? He looked at the line, his jaw tightened. I wasn't there when she got his signature. She said he came in when it was being notarized, but he didn't sign this, Meredith said. I'd know it anywhere. She went to her mother's sewing basket and found a birthday card from 3 years ago. Alistair's handwriting on the inside, exactly as she remembered it. She placed it beside the land transfer document on the table. Cole looked at both signatures for a long time. Then he pressed his hand flat on the table and stared at the ceiling. She forged it, he said. Yes, Meredith said. The following morning, she was sitting across from a lawyer named Patricia Ng, who had spent 20 years working elder financial abuse cases, and who read documents the way Meredith read structural drawings. Precisely, without warmth for the material, looking for what would fail. Meredith laid everything out, the e-transfer records, the land registry, the screenshots, the 2 signatures side by side, the empty pantry, the taped glasses, the missing items from the walls. Patricia Ng read without speaking, then she looked up. How much did you transfer to your sister over 11 years? $87,400. The lawyer made a note. And your parents received none of it directly. Small amounts in cash. She told them I was struggling, that they shouldn't ask for more. Patricia Ng wrote that down too. Then she turned to the land transfer document and studied both signatures under the desk lamp. She drew a small circle around the A on the forged version. This was copied, she said. Not well, the stroke stops and restarts here. Someone tracing, not writing. Combined with the e-transfer records and the coercion of your brother, we have multiple grounds. She removed her glasses. This has crossed into criminal territory. The word landed in the room like a dropped weight. Meredith sat with it. She had driven home to give her parents a condo by the water. Instead, she was in a law office building a fraud case against her eldest sister. She thought of her father's taped glasses. She thought of the pale rectangles on the walls. She thought of her mother turning too quickly from the counter on the day she arrived, hiding the empty shelves behind a practiced smile. What comes next? She asked. We file an emergency freeze on the land transfer. We notify the county registry of the suspected title fraud. We prepare a referral to the Crown for elder financial abuse and document forgery. Patricia Ng paused. Your brother's cooperation matters. His own liability is real. But his statement substantially strengthens what we're building. He'll give it, Meredith said. She had watched Cole at the kitchen table the morning before. The way his shame had slowly shifted into something that looked almost like a man deciding to stand up. That evening Meredith called Denise. She did not raise her voice. She was deliberate about that. She said she was home. She said she had visited the land registry. She said she had spoken with a lawyer. She said she thought Denise should come to the house and see their parents. Denise arrived carrying the same composure she had always carried. The composure Meredith had once mistaken for reliability. She came through the front door and looked at the kitchen, at their parents sitting at the table, at Meredith standing beside it, at the folder open on the surface between them. This is a family matter, Denise said. It became a legal matter, Meredith said, when you forged Dad's signature on a land transfer. Something shifted behind Denise's eyes. She looked at the folder. I was protecting the estate. $87,000, Meredith said. 11 years, every transfer with a note, everyone confirmed by you. Where did it go? Denise looked at their parents. Frances had her hands folded in her lap. Alistair was looking at his eldest daughter with an expression Meredith had never seen on him before. Not anger, but the particular sadness of a man who was finally seeing something he had refused to believe was possible. Dad, Denise started. Don't, he said. His voice was quiet, it filled the room anyway. You came to me with papers, he said. You put your hand on my shoulder. You asked me if I thought you would ever hurt this family. He stopped, I said. No, I felt ashamed for wondering. He looked toward the window, toward the dark where the lake was. I built that cabin. I drove out there every weekend for 3 summers. I built it because I wanted to leave something behind for you children, all 3 of you. He looked back at her, and you knew that. You knew exactly what it meant. Denise did not answer. A person can make mistakes, Alistair said. I've known that my whole life. But a daughter does not take her mother's things off the walls and call it clearing out. She does not sign her father's name to a document he never read. She does not tell her brother that his sister is struggling so that her parents are too ashamed to ask for help. His voice had not risen, if anything it had gone quieter. That is not a mistake, that is a choice. The kitchen was perfectly still. Cole arrived 20 minutes later. He sat across from Denise and told her, directly and without looking away, that he had given a full statement to the lawyer, that the screenshots were already in the file, that he was not going to protect her anymore. Denise left without another word. The case moved quickly. Patricia Ng filed the emergency freeze within 48 hours. The county registry flagged the Mercer Lake title pending investigation. Within 3 weeks the referral reached the Crown's office. Denise Cairns was formally charged with elder financial abuse, fraud over $5,000 and document forgery. The money had not been hidden carefully. Renovations to her own home. A car lease she had no clear income to support. A property in her daughter's name purchased with cash 14 months earlier. The paper trail was not clever. It was the trail of someone who had believed for a very long time that no one was going to look. Cole repaid what he had taken from their father's emergency fund. He arranged it through the lawyer, a structured repayment, a real schedule, a signed agreement. He told his parents himself. He sat at the same kitchen table and said it plainly, without softening it. What he had taken, why and what it had cost them. His father listened without interrupting. his mother cried quietly. When Cole finished, Alistair looked at his son for a long moment and said, "All right, we'll start from here." That was all. 3 weeks after Meredith arrived in Kenmore, her parents stood in a 2-bedroom unit in Kitsilano, looking at afternoon light coming through a south-facing window. Frances walked to the glass door that opened onto the patio, and stood looking at the empty planters lined along the railing. "I could do something with those," she said. Alistair stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, the way he always took the measure of a space. Not as a man evaluating comfort but as someone who understood how things were built and what would last. He turned until he was facing the window, and then he was quiet for a while. Meredith stood in the hallway and did not rush him. Finally he said, "Good light in here." "I know," she said, "I picked it for that." He nodded once. Then he looked at his daughter, and for the first time since she had arrived to find him careful and thin in a doorway, his face held something that was not managing or enduring. It was simply present, clear and unguarded, and his. "You came back," he said. "I told you I would," she said. She had learned something in those weeks that she carried with her afterward. Not the lesson about trust, though that was real enough. Something quieter. Her mother had not stayed silent because she was weak. Her father had not signed his name away because he was foolish. They had endured and protected and made do, because they were the kind of people who did not burden the ones they loved. That goodness had been used against them, deliberately, by someone who understood exactly how much it was worth. What Meredith knew now, and would not forget, was that love could not only send a transfer with a note, it had to show up. It had to sit at the table and look at the shelves and ask twice when the answer was fine. It had to be close enough to see what was being hidden. She thought about that every Sunday when she knocked on their door, which she did every week without exception. Bringing groceries she had chosen herself, staying for dinner, leaving only after the building had gone quiet and the light outside had faded, and her parents were safe inside a place she had put her own name on. That was the promise she intended to keep.